Hello and welcome to the award-winning Alexander Isak, transfer gutter show. What am I like? With me, Rob Gutmann, with him, Josh Williams, with him, Phil Blundell, and with his nibs, Neil Atkinson. Himself. Today's lovely midweek edition of the award-winning Gutter is brought to us by our friend Saily. We are in association with Saily, in fact. What is Saily, you ask? Saily is a new eSIM service app from our friends at NordVPN, where you can choose from several affordable eSIM plans in over 200 countries and 8 regions, Josh. 8. Can't stress that enough. If you've ever struggled, Phil, to find Wi-Fi abroad or returned from holiday to a nasty mobile phone bill, nasty one, how nasty would it have to be for you to categorise it as nasty?
I had a 1,200 quid one once. I wouldn't get it these days.
Well, I tell you what, Saily wouldn't let that happen to you.
Saily would
not let that happen to you. You'll understand then what difference a local SIM card can make. An eSIM provides an internet connection wherever you travel and also saves you money on roaming. Roaming fees, Josh, for God's sake. So join the many Tor subscribers who have already taken advantage of this fantastic service and download that Saily app, and download Saily in the App Store by scanning the QR code on screen. Can't stress this bit enough, Phil. Make sure you use the code TAW at checkout and get a 15% off our first purchase. All the details are also in the episode description box. And I think Alexander Isak, Phil, who is currently, we believe, training in Spain, he will have purchased his Saily SIM, downloaded it via the Tor QR code, I imagine. But the reports,
imagine if it turned out he had.
Imagine if it turned out he had. Imagine such a thing. Well, one thing we don't have to imagine, because I think it's sort of been verified by most of the senior press pack, let's call them, that our boy Alexander is in training at Sociedad or with their team or using their facilities, and reportedly his agents over there with him. So one thing we can safely say, he's not at Newcastle, he remains on strike. Your thoughts?
It feels like there's a very heavy PR game at play now, in terms of he's making it look like he wants to get out, and Newcastle are sort of allowing things to happen, get out, that make it look like they're sort of, well, there's nothing we could do about it. Gonna have to get rid of him. You know, he wants to leave. He's not even training. He's refused to come on this pre-season tour. He's not even training at our training ground. He's gone to Spain to train, which is, when you think about it, is quite mad that he's not.
We're going to hear soon that he pushed over a small child.
Yeah, exactly.
While he was in Spain,
but not far off.
With a Newcastle scarf on.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it is all. It does feel like the whole thing is now developing into a bit of a PR war. So Newcastle can go, look, we had to sell him. He made it. He put us into a position where we couldn't do anything else, and here we are. We've got to sell him, and now we've got to sign some players, and we'll do our best. It's not our fault if things don't work out this season. You got to remember that's not our fault. That's what it feels like they're saying now, and it does feel like there's talk of Liverpool are going to put a bid in, and it does feel like we're getting to a sort of end game, I think, now.
I've actually got a bit of inside info on this. I'm one of the many people who's got a very similar type of inside info on it, and I'll caveat it with this: take it as you will, or whatever we used to say on internet chat rooms back in the day. Take it on face value or whatever. I had a meeting earlier this morning with a fella, can't name him for obvious reasons. A fella might work in a similar industry to me, but he's based in the northeast, and he was introduced to Alexander Isak's agent about 6 to 8 weeks ago. Said agent said to my man, my client is definitely leaving in the summer to play for, wait for it, a team in red. To which I made a brilliant joke, what, Sunderland? Right, because the fellow was northeast based and supported Sunderland. He didn't laugh at all. So there you go, exclusive on the Anfield Wrap. I mean, clip that, motherfuckers. There's a question or a point. There's a question or a point. Reaction, Josh. No, you don't have to react, because I'm not the only one to said this. And there has been some stuff sort of seeping out on the various platforms. There was a sense of a gentleman's agreement, perhaps, between Isak's agent and the club, between Isak and the club, that this would be his last season at the club. I think Melissa Reddy sort of alluded to it or hinted at it, and others have too. And it does fit. There is a certain vibe that probably did happen. I don't know what your feeling is.
No, I just think it's an absolute mess from their end. I think they've handled it so badly, to be honest. It reminds me a little bit of like early days Liverpool, where, you know, the likes of Sterling, Suarez, Coutinho, Torres. You obviously want to hold on to these players, but it's like it's a bit of an ego thing almost, and I think it would have just been so much easier, especially if that's true. You know, the knowledge that Isak apparently told them before the end of the season, sort of thing. This is me last. I want to leave, sort of thing. It would just be so much easier for them if they just went like, we're going to sell him because he wants to leave, and just leave it at that. But like, they're in this weird state where they're not quite a heavyweight yet, but they're moving away from the rest of the pack. But they want to be a heavyweight, but they can't because they're blaming PSR and all this sort of thing. But right now, Isak is on a higher level than the rest of the team that he's playing for. You know, he can't win the Champions League with Newcastle. He is a Champions League winning player. So when that happens and the player just kind of moves to a different level than what you're currently on, you do just kind of, in the modern day at least, have to accept that that's the reality and take as much money as you can for him and reinvest it as quickly as possible and ensure that on the opposite end you're in a better spot, ideally. But the way they've handled it, this ego thing, dragging it out, making it, you know, painting him into a villain, you know, missing out on several targets in the process. It's just amateur hour, really. And I think he's going to move. I think he'll end up playing for Liverpool. I think Newcastle, as it stands, we don't even know if they're going to get Sesko, do we? But they're going to be as it stands, it looks like they're going to be in a tricky spot come the start of the season. Like,
yeah, I want to come on to their targets again in a minute. That overshifting, updating list, but I thought most interesting piece of new information, maybe, Neil, that's come out about the situation was in Lee Ryder's piece for the Newcastle Chronicle this morning. He said, amongst other things, Newcastle Chiefs are angry at the prospect of waiting around for Liverpool to drum up the funds to sign their star man. I thought, wow, the messaging has moved at a rate in this one. So from he's not for sale to we're annoyed that you haven't come up with a bid yet. You know, the inference that it's somehow now Liverpool's fault. It's a sort of, feels like a sort of reality inversion whereby obviously we want to sell him, but you've got to come up with the money. What did you make of that? Am I reading too much into it?
I think it's a bit daft. I think there may well end up being ultimately
bullshit,
a little bit more. I think it's predominantly bullshit, but then almost everything in this world is bullshit. It's fair to say, I think at some point Newcastle will ask for a fee that there's every chance Liverpool say, well, we're not going to pay that too, and then it'll end up settled somewhere in the middle between supposedly Liverpool's earlier sort of moves and offers, and when Newcastle end up, and I suspect it will end up in a British transfer record between two British clubs at the very least. But
I think the add-ons are going to be fun, by the way. Like, I mean, if Newcastle win the space race against whatever China, then another 5 million will be. Do you know what I mean? What I'm getting at is I think they'll want a top-line figure for PR purposes as much as anything.
Yeah, I think there's every chance of that, and that'll be part of the whole thing. So this is the bullshit of that universe. So it's there all the time, and that is going to come at some point. As I say, they are going to want an enormous fee, and Liverpool, I think, are happy to pay a one rung below enormous fee, and moving people around on that will be a thing. I think in general the Newcastle being a bit of a mess thing, I think is still the critical part of this, from whether or not it happens. I think it's quite interesting to sort of analyse Newcastle's business since the takeover, because I think what they did when they first got hold of the club was they take a couple of flyers on players who people aren't quite sure of, which for instance is Gutmann and Isak, and both of them end up being roaring successes. They pick off from clubs they were battling with at the time, in terms of Chris Wood, and then the following season someone like Anthony Gordon sort of falls into that category. And then Sven Botman is another flyer. The thing about Isak, Sven Botman, Gutmann was a lot of big clubs were linked with them for an extended period of time, but no one was quite sure.
Tonali?
And well, Tonali's interested in that. Tonali's arguably the one that doesn't fit any of the profiles, and then and then he gets the ban. So this is a reason why he would, but everyone was prepared for him to move on at that moment in time from Italian football. And then, for instance, you end up with Barnes, Livramento. I think the last genuinely shrewd business they've done is Minter and Lewis Hall. I think it's fair to describe both of them as shrewd. I think Barnes is a good player, don't get me wrong, but they do pay a fair whack to Leicester for that. But in there as well, they end up with, they did the Chris Wood thing, I think in part to nobble Burnley at the moment when they were battling with Burnley for relegation, but they soon just stride away from that, and Chris Wood's not much use to them in terms of where it is they're going to end up. My point here, though, is that I think that in the past, I think where Newcastle are now trying to shop, one of the issues, we've used this metaphor before with Liverpool, what shop are Liverpool shopping in? One of the issues is, I think in terms of Newcastle are trying to shop in a shop that doesn't want to sell to them, or where the product does not want to come and join Newcastle for a variety of reasons. So Sesko and his agent will have spent 12 months feeling as though things go a certain way, we could end up at a club like Arsenal. And now all of a sudden it's Newcastle or Manchester United, and I think that there should be a concern. I think everyone's acting like Sesko might go to Manchester United over Newcastle. There's a chance, as happened last summer, or that Sesko and his agent say, we'll do another year in Leipzig because we think we'll get a better offer next summer. Whereas if we go to you, we're stuck with you for 3 years, say. So I think that this is, if you look at where Newcastle in the past, and part of the problem as well is obviously with all the issues that they've had behind the scenes for the previous 12 months, if not arguably longer, they haven't got their own strategy in place. They haven't had their own strategy in place to be part of all of this. And I think they've just been sort of hanging on and hoping for the best and hoping something pops up, which may be a way you can describe Alanga, who I'd argue they're probably overpaid for in terms of output, though I think he's a really good, exciting footballer who's got a lot to bring. So it's going to be, I think that this remains the difficult part, is put the bullshit to one side and think instead about the strategy or the lack thereof. And Liverpool have still, I think, got to get round that hurdle with a Newcastle who I would argue have stopped being canny and stopped taking good gambles, and instead, I would argue maybe about 18 months, 2 years ago, started to go into a bit of reverse. They do Lewis Hall on loan with a need to buy in the summer of 2023.
I think, though, what I found interesting in the way that was phrased by Lee Ryder is, okay, we've seen that the messaging move. Stay with you on it. We've seen it move from not for sale till won't count as a sale unless at minimum until Newcastle have brought in high quality replacements, which is what you just been describing. But this is more putting the timing, which is a lot of what we're talking about here, back into Liverpool's court. It's almost like, well, if Liverpool get a bloody wriggle on and get their sales done, we're here and waiting. They're almost moving away from their needs, I think, towards and putting a pressure. I think in a sense they want not to be under pressure to solve their striker problem. They want Liverpool to be seen to be under pressure to come up with the dough. That's what I'm reading.
But they might want to do that in the PR sense, but I still think the block will be the first sentence that you just said, which is until Newcastle feel as though they're going to get the replacement, the high-profile replacement that they want, I think they're going to be really reluctant to do business with Liverpool, and they might feel as though they can gut it out. I think that, this has long been the problem. Newcastle have got to... This is the problem back when Isak wants to talk to them whenever to say, I want to go, like Josh was saying before. And as part of all of that, you've got a couple of options there. One is that you can decide that you can communicate back and give a really hard line. What's being suggested is that no one's communicated very much. So as far as Isak's concerned, it's almost like, well, I sent the last email and it said this. I think your problem is Newcastle, until there is a replacement of high quality, Newcastle are going to be really... it further incentivises Newcastle just basically gritting their teeth and coming up with any reason to say, well, this deal's not moving on at the moment. They want to be able to say to Isak, well, they've got to put a bid in, but they might not be... The whole idea of Liverpool want to be encouraged to put a bid in.
Okay.
There's a contradict. There could end up being they can say different things to different people, and your point is, well, this thing's changed. Well, all that is just saying different things to different people. I think the solid reality that everyone's got to get over is until Newcastle get a high-quality replacement, there's greater incentive for them to grit their teeth and think to themselves, you know what? All we've got to do is get to the 1st of September, because it's not like he's going to refuse to play football for 3 months.
Well, you see, this is what I want to address, Phil, because I think our understanding of what's actually going on is it's obvious, it's developing, and it's developing every couple of days with these insights that are seeping out. Things like that the agent feels potentially that he had maybe a gentleman's agreement going back months. The things I heard, and I'm not the only one I said, is heard that the agent believed that his client was definitively moving this summer. What I'm getting at is, I think there's a universe, and it may be the actual universe, where Newcastle know, not a battling with the player, know that they are selling this footballer this summer. And it is about timing as to when that happens. I'm beginning to think and it might be wishful thinking, that they don't think there's a scenario, as the fans are clinging to, actually, by the way, if you check some of the online activity, that come September the 1st, the player will be talked around for coming off strike. I think there's possibly a long stop date agreed between the agent and player, more or less, and suitors like Liverpool, where this deal gets done regardless of a replacement. They'd like a replacement, and they've wanted. And the reason I think this possibly wasn't done on June the 1st or June the 15th or whatever is because Newcastle haven't got that replacement in. They wanted the PR victory of getting the replacement in. But I think we might be. My point is, we're coming to a point where that might not be an option for them. That the deal is the deal in its own universe.
Yeah, the communications have been strange for about a month now. I think there was a piece in, I can't remember when it was. I think it was the Times about it. It was about a month ago where it basically sort of said, "Well, he's not for sale, but we're expecting a bid." And it was very like I didn't think there was any chance of this happening whatsoever until I read that, and then I started to think it was a really strange, specific thing.
I remember the piece. Me and you were texting about it straight away.
Yeah, it was just odd, and it sort of spiraled from there. And it does sort of feel like that it was the start of something. And what you're saying about a player coming in to link up with it, and it can all go swimmingly, and they can look like that they've won in some ways. Felt like that was possibly a thing, and now, as you say, it just doesn't feel like they're in a position where
We PR'd that over Torres and Suarez for about 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does feel sort of where they are in terms of they could have come out of this looking like they were fully in control, knew exactly what they do, and everything was done on their terms. But it's sort of spiraled to the point now where they've missed out on, Delap, Pedro, Ekitike. Looks like possibly Sesko. I think there's somebody else as well. They can't get Wisser in.
I think they're losing.
They probably will, but they're sort of like they're making it very hard for them to come out of this looking like they've in any way won, which I don't think was their game a month ago.
Yeah, I thought it was intriguing, Josh, that Alex Crook from TalkSport has said it was Alexander Isak's camp, not Liverpool, that leaked the club's approach to Newcastle to the media. This is going. Phil didn't reference that one. There was a subsequent story, maybe a week after the one we were talking about, Phil, whereby most of the media went with Liverpool are expected to bid 120 million. It seems that leak came from Isak's camp. What do you read into that?
Yeah, I'm not too sure, to be honest. I think a lot of parties in this store are putting way too much weight on this PR thing. Like just,
like me.
I think even from a no. I'm thinking everyone, especially their camp, they seem to be so intent on winning the PR or whatever, and painting this picture in the media. No one will care, and I'm including supporters in that, if on the other end you come out and you're still in a healthy place. People will care if you're not, and the longer this gets dragged on, the longer it sounds a bit like. Do you remember when we sold Suarez? And we thought we were getting Alexis Sanchez, and then we end up with Balotelli and all this nonsense, and we end up in a really bad place, and it looks just like a disaster. It's very reminiscent of that for me, whereas, and I think a lot of it stems from Newcastle being in an unfamiliar position when it comes to selling their best player. They're just not used to doing it. Whereas if you look at Leverkusen, for example, who are accustomed to doing this, start of the summer straight away, Florian Wirtz, auction, go and see the clubs, 100 million sorted, and now they've got the rest of the summer to invest that 100 million well, and they move away from and they go from there, sort of thing. Newcastle, as I said earlier, are going in this like ego place, this PR place, when it just could have been handled so much easier from the off if they'd have just went, listen, he absolutely wants to go, we're going to reinvest really well, judges at the end of the summer. And we'll go from there. But I think a lot of it is naivety and a lack of experience with this. Maybe it's on Eddie Howe for being on his own with this, almost, with the lack of a sporting director above him and stuff. But
I think that this is the key problem here is that I think if you've got a strategy, by the way, when I say if you've got a strategy, I don't mean you sit down and come up with it on June the 1st. I mean if from the 1st of January you've got a strategy that you're working on and you're allowing developments to come, which include, for instance, what looks like we might well qualify for the Champions League here, and all that sort of stuff, and you employ that into your strategy, and you know in March, broadly, what you're likely to do if we come 4th, if we come 5th, if we come 6th, this is our direction of travel. But baked into that is, but this fellow wants to go. So we need to maximise what we get for him, and we need to make sure we're flipping it back the other way. But it's all right, because we've been wooing João Pedro for 6 months. And I think that this is the bit that's been missing for Newcastle. I'm struck by the number of times sometimes it feels as though they are interested in a player, but it seems to have come as a mild surprise to everybody, including the player's own agent, that this is the player that they're now interested in.
Yeah.
And I think that's your problem here. And they, to
It's
be fair,
firefighting, really, isn't
I think they have been firefighting, and I think this comes from the fact that there is, and I think in a number of ways you can end up saying that Eddie Howe looks like he's done a really good job last season, because it doesn't look like he's got much support around him at this point in time. But this is where the reality, this kicks in. He was busy qualifying for the Champions League and winning Newcastle's first trophy for 50 years. Now, 60 years, the reality though now is that, well, they're not prepared for this summer. And someone might end up saying, it feels like it might have been a bit of a power grab from Eddie Howe. But if there's no one else around to do a job and he feels as though it needs doing, well, he can't magic a director of football into existence. He might just have felt like, I need to do a little bit of this on top of everything else I've got to do. But he was being successful in his main job here without that support around him. So you end up in a situation where they did seem to be genuinely interested in Pedro, and they did seem to think they had a really good shout at getting Pedro. And maybe this would be easier if right now they were able to say to themselves, well, we already got Pedro in. If we get Worcester in alongside him, it's not ideal, but we got Pedro for €60 million. We're going to get €140 million for Isak. We can do other things for that money, but one of the things we can also do is just bank it till January or next summer when we've got our plan and we all move forward. But they're not in that position either. And this, if you're Liverpool now, this is your big concern, is that the longer all of this goes on, where it feels as though a number of players don't even want to concede. Like, if I was Watkins, I would not be interested in moving to Newcastle, frankly. At this point in time. The reason why is because it's ultimately very, very sideways. You're already settled at Villa, unless Villa, who haven't got a replacement for you yet, by the way, are shunting you out the door, which maybe they are. So if that's the case, it's different. But unless that's the case, I'd be sort of saying, I may as well just fucking crack on here. And do another season here. But if I'd have been sold a project of Newcastle from last September, when I wasn't getting me start and I was being a bit annoyed, and they've talked me round and we put it all on the table, then it all feels a little bit different. But all that bit's the bit that's not happened.
Yeah, I think on the Eddie Howe thing, like, I mean, to be clear, I'm not blaming him or anything like that for the current situation that they're in. But even the targets that they're getting linked with screams Premier League manager, going for established Premier League players.
But he hasn't got a sporting director.
Well, exactly, that's what I mean. So it comes from the top. It's an organisational thing, a lack of structure, as you say. But if you think of Pedro, Visser, Delap, Rodrigo Muniz now Calvert-Lewin. Šeško is the only one, and he's quite an established European talent who is not based in England. So it is Eddie Howe steering the ship. I rate Eddie Howe. I think he's very, very good, but in the modern day, you just mentioned there about his job, getting Champions League football, winning a trophy and that. He's got enough on his plate, mate, to cover the whole of Europe in a scouting sense. So, yeah, it is very amateurish to me. It reminds me of us a few years back, and a lot of clubs go through this, and it's not going well for them at all.
I'm still of the mind that this deal may go through without them having any new strikers in the building. Literally at the point the deal happens, I think they will get someone over the line. But by the sounds of it, Wisser is possibly not a million miles off our deal with Gahey, in the sense that both sides are just going to stare each other out for a little bit longer, then call it quits, and then go, come on, let's be sensible, let's do the deal. I think it sounds to me like Wisser is moving for one, and Newcastle is his only destination. He hasn't really been linked strongly elsewhere.
I worry about Brentford with that one though, just because they're so like switched on when it comes to this.
They'll get their fee.
Yeah, but with Man United, like, they just took the absolute piss when it comes to Bremo, like, and took them the cleaners eventually. They can sense that Newcastle are really desperate, and they've got Visser there who they want. So they're going to play hardball naturally. But
they possibly got about 7-8 million more out of Man U than Man U expected to pay in the end, maybe something like that. But eventually they call time on it, and I think they will. My point is, I agree with you. I think they will hardball Newcastle. They will possibly make Newcastle slightly overpay, but I think they will get the player. Phil,
I think they probably will. I think there's just. I think at some point Newcastle will sort of possibly have to just sell Isak and draw a line under this and go and move on, and just move on to things, because they have a lot to do. Like, they have. I think it's really underrated generally how much Newcastle need to do. I think they've now basically got 4 midfielders to do the entire season, because Joe Willock did his Achilles yesterday. Yeah. He's got quite possibly a season-ending injury. It means they've basically got 4 midfielders now.
It's almost like Liverpool have one they could buy.
Well, yeah, absolutely, but they're going to have to sort of think, well, we just need to get stuff done, and you get the money in, you move the player on, you sort of demonstrate, right, this is where we are now, and you go from there. And at some point, they're just going to have to bite the bullet, I think, because they can't. I don't think they can spend the next sort of month trying to keep Alexander Isak, because ultimately it'll be a waste of time if they don't sort the other areas out anyway. It's all well and good having a really good striker, but the rest of the team is in such a way that it's just not going to do anything for them for the rest of the season. They'll probably go out the Champions League relatively early. They won't win a domestic cup, and they'll come about 9th at the way, and that's if they manage to keep him.
And then if they sell him in the future, then
he loses value. They're not in
in
the Champions League. He's lost value, and at some point they're just going to have to go, hang on, we need to just sort this out. And I think
the interesting thing is, I think all that. I think that, and I think
I also think that when the thing about them, why haven't they bid yet, is partially linked to that as well. In that, well, can you just hurry up and bid so we can get this moving and sort it out? But then there's Liverpool going, well, if we hold on a little bit longer, we might save 5-10 million here just from them feeling that you put them under a little bit of pressure to get things moving. So it sort of makes sense.
You see, yeah, I agree with you. I think this is why I think this is possibly the end game, because Liverpool have signalled, or Alexander Isak's camp have signalled that Liverpool are prepared to pay a hefty fee, not necessarily the full fee, but the hefty fee. So at some point, Liverpool don't want to be told you're going to write whatever cheque Newcastle tell them to write. So that's why I think Liverpool are pausing, scratching their chin a little longer than Newcastle would like, knowing full well that the player and his camp are signalling that the player is not going to kick another ball for the Newcastle Football Club. Now there is, I'll stay with you on this one, Phil, as Neil alluded to earlier, the September the 1st factor. Newcastle can tell themselves, and fans can tell themselves, or anyone can come up with a narrative that says, yeah, he's going to want to play football, he's going to come to heel. But they don't know that. They don't know that. And if that doesn't happen, and he continues his strike, or he protects his body whilst he's playing because he wants a January move, that's the worst of all possible worlds for Newcastle, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that there is a way where he will just eventually play football if they really play hardball. But as I said a minute or two ago, to what end? Like,
keep himself a bit fit.
Oh, you've got Alexander Isak, congratulations. That's the football club. Players will come, players will go. Newcastle United will exist for a very long time. There will be things that happen after Alexander Isak, regardless of when he leaves, and there is a point where it's going to not be in the best interest of Newcastle to fight this battle for another month. I just don't really see what the purpose of it would be for them. Like, what
PR?
Well, do you remember what Van Dijk?
That's it. But also not having faith in your own strategy. This is because one of the problems that you have here is it's not. I don't think it's necessarily just PR. It is if you currently own Newcastle, you're responsible for Newcastle at any sort of corporate level. You may well genuinely, and it's plausible to be of the view, we are really struggling to get people in. We didn't have a director of football. We didn't even have. We've now recruited a CEO, so we finally got that sorted out. You know what we could do with 4 more months of Alexander Isak playing football for us, whilst we get our fucking plan together for what we're going to do the other side of that. So I don't think it is as simple as PR, and I don't think it is all downside for Newcastle if they come to a world where they think, you know what, we can do what Liverpool did with Coutinho going back in 2017 and get to that point of January, and then on January the 1st, speak to him, speak to the players, speak to Liverpool and say, this is what we're going to do, this is our plan, this is what we need. Now, I don't even think they're coherent enough for that at this stage, frankly. But my point and my point all the way through on this is there's a lot of people who will rightly make the argument because you've seen Liverpool do it so many times. These are your smart plays, this is what a smart football club does. But if internally they at the minute have come to the same analysis we've just come to around this table, they're not a smart football club at the moment, then they could well decide, right, we'll do this deal when we're a smart football club because that's when we can benefit from it. And when we haven't just missed out on this list here because we're not actually in good nick to convince people to come and play for Newcastle at this point in time. And that remains for me the overall, and has been all the way through, the overarching concern is that Newcastle don't currently look competent enough to be able to do what they need to do to make up for what they will perceive to be what they lose if Isak goes.
I think the problem is this, is I think there's not their plan A, but their scenario A, I think they have realised for a good while, is that the player wanted to go and they would take and request good money for the player. But in the interim, by the time that happened, they would have bought in quality recruits. Now, that having not happened, and possibly going to the end of the window and maybe not having happened, changes their outlook. We're all accepting that. But there's a difference, and I think what you're saying, Neil, is, but hang on, their fallback position is they get the player back for a few months, and he's good, right? And that's not the end of the world for them. Because let's look at the Coutinho parallel. There's a difference, though, with the Coutinho situation. And I think I'm trying to cast my mind back, but I remember he went on our pre-season tour. He played pre-season games. I remember him dovetailing well with Salah. And then it was fairly late in the window. It might have been that the Premier League was about to start. He started agitating, and Barcelona went in strong. And Klopp came out, and I very clearly remember this going, we don't have time to sign a replacement. He can't go. That was a key factor, but this isn't the case here. So I think Liverpool were able to sit down with Phil and Coutinho back at the time and go, tell you what, you've done it late in the window. Barcelona have come late in the window. That's not fair. We do hear you, but you've also got to bear our concerns in mind here, for the reasons we've just outlined. We'll do a gentleman's agreement with you, and I'm sure your teammates will agree with us, by the way, because they are a factor. You can leave in January. Just give us your best for the next few months. And he went, see what you're saying, sounds fair. Broadly speaking, don't think that quite applies. I mean, it could end up that way, as Neil described, but I don't think that quite applies here, Phil. I don't think it quite applies, because I think they've had long enough. I think they've had notice of this.
Yeah, well, you're exclusive from before.
Yes.
Sort of. If that is the case, then it is not a new thing to them. They didn't suddenly find out a couple of weeks ago, and ultimately the stories have been coming out of Newcastle for a month now that they were expecting a bid. This is not. It really doesn't feel like new information to anyone involved at all.
But even if you disregard what I've heard today, the thing in the press, in the Times and everywhere, was 3 or 4 weeks ago that Liverpool were readying this bid.
I just checked; it was over a month ago.
Right, and there's still 4 or 5 weeks of the window left. That's not what Liverpool had with Coutinho. That's enough time, So I don't think the player readily...
But the flip side of this is, though, the Liverpool that you're describing then was a confident, certain football club where there'd been continuity of message in every single department for the previous 2 seasons, where there was real clarity of direction of travel, and there could be certainty all round.
The replacements as well had already been signed in Mo Salah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a busy. You're correct. They had a busy, lively summer. So yeah,
and that whole thing spiraled so quickly because of the PSG Neymar thing. They just shocked the world completely by making that bid and taking that player, and then Barcelona had all this money, didn't know what to do with it. Liverpool are in a position where obviously willing to sell, because we ended up selling them anyway. But we were like, it's too late. It doesn't benefit us. Go away. Come back in January.
It's not what's happening here.
No, it's not. It's
no
not.
Neymar,
Now you've got
No shocks, are there?
There's no shocks here.
These, I think they'll have known for most of the year that this is ominous in the distance, and they've just kind of, by the looks of it, they've buried their heads a little bit. And I agree with what Neil was saying, by the way, about they don't seem competent enough to navigate this.
Do you know what I think? I think might have happened to a degree. I think they were 50-50, maybe even only 40% likely to make Champions League from January till, say, April. And then they picked up that head of steam and they saw Champions League looming, and without wanting to front it directly with the player and his agents, thought, if we get Champions League, we'll sit down with them at our leisure in the close season. It'll be a different story, because we'll then be, we've won the league, everything's with us, the momentum's with us. We'll have this. Let's just play it cool. Let's play it. Also, they were leaking out bigger and bigger prices. No one was bashing their door down on those big prices. Players' camp maybe not talking to them, but I think what was going on in the players' camp was a resoluteness. Nope, they gave us the nod that, if a reasonable bid came in, we could move this summer. And I think a period of non-communication as to direction of travel was possibly going on between the two sides, exacerbated by, drumroll, every point you've been making, Neil, about lack of clarity and people in positions at the top. This is what I'm thinking on it.
There's one remaining little thing which is true, and it's worth saying that this used to happen to Liverpool, and it may well have happened to Liverpool recently, and we'll never know. But I think they're also geographically an unfashionable move. I think this is worth bearing in mind in the context of a lot of this, who wants to go there and who doesn't. We used to have a thing that there were certain players where coming in from abroad, everyone's much happier if they're around London, etc., etc.
Benitez on the overlap about 6 months ago. And he basically said it was really hard to get them to Liverpool because the wives couldn't go shopping.
And
even versus Manchester.
Yeah, even back then. And now I think that for us now, Liverpool's a different place for a wide variety of reasons, and it's perceived differently and all of that sort of stuff. But I do think that this is another moving part that they've got, which is it remains an unfashionable place to go. And if you go again, I'll go back to you look at those signings that they made. It always reminds me a little bit of what was said a lot about Christian Eriksen and Spurs, which is everyone has had a look. No one was quite sure, and Spurs were prepared to go for it. And I think if you sort of go through that, including Isak himself, everyone had been talking, everyone knew, everyone was like, they could be good, they might not be. And on the whole, they actually had an exceptionally good success rate in that period. But they were all gambles that every big club had been linked to. And those players obviously went, no, this is how I get my move into the Premier League. What I would say is, if you're Newcastle, that was actually a decent strategy and one that would have been worth revisiting last summer, moving into this summer. And they've chosen to go down a different path. And the other part of this as well is part of why that strategy works for you is you let players move on at the point at which they want to move on. And that is an important part of this. But currently, I think if you're Newcastle, as I say, it's understandable if you have a lack of faith in your own recruitment.
Do you know what changed, Neil? I think as much as anything is PSR revealed its teeth. And that I think that football club took what it saw happen to Everton and Nottingham Forest very seriously, and arguably so it should have done. And it began to. I mean, if you look back, cast yourself back to last summer, it began to shit its pants. The football club, in terms of they were hawking round their top stars, and virtually all of them there was some link to. We were definitely tantalised with the prospect of Anthony Gordon. There was some talk about Chelsea and Newcastle having talks about Isak even then. Eddie Howe made statements about having to potentially sell a star, and there was a lot of rumours around Guimaraes. So the football club, I think, from having strode quite confidently for the first 2 or 3 years, with the ownership buying intelligent targets, not the highest profile but reasonable profile, suddenly lost its bottle. Wasn't even sure when it. I think what has begun to happen. It's not sure when it walks into a negotiating room or picks up a phone to an agent. Whatever it is. What the contract it can offer, what the contract that can be offered is. I think they're hedging their bets, and this uncertainty is bleeding through.
But I think that was also part of the decided last summer to have in terms of the top players, or what we hold strategy. Liverpool, to use the Coutinho parallel, Liverpool literally are in a position where they choose, and Klopp wanted to do it earlier, but they choose, we can sell Coutinho and we can put this money back in and we can improve. Where they've ended up, I think loss of bottle is a good way to phrase it, but I think it's not just in the context of PSR, but there's a wider context as well. I think where they've ended up is they're very much in this. Last summer there's an argument that the football club now would be in a better place if you keep Anderson and Minter and you move Anthony Gordon on. You're in a better place from a PSR point of view, but you've got those two players, both of whom show, I think Anderson especially, that they're accepted. You just talked about Newcastle's midfield. Right now, Elliot Anderson would look fucking mustard in Newcastle's midfield. You'd be feeling in great nick. You wouldn't have had to just do the money you've just done on Alanga if you'd have kept hold of Minter. You could have done Gordon, reinvested in another gamble that may well have paid off for you throughout the course of last season, and now you're being better nick. But to do all of that, you've got to have the strategy, the certainty and the confidence, and that's all football clubs. Liverpool didn't have a PSR issue when they sold Coutinho, or an FFP issue, but they had, we don't have enough fucking money to get the players that we want to get in, so we need to make the money work for us issue. But Liverpool had the confidence. And had the confidence and the certainty and the plan and the coach and the overarching and everyone was aligned and this is where we go. The problem at the minute with Newcastle is you can't say everyone's aligned, because there's actually no such thing as everyone. It's not even a question of whether or not there's not been any such thing as everyone. And I think they buried their heads in the sand. I agree, they will have thought, you know what, if we just get Champions League here, because all the way through last season I was thinking we could get Isak if they don't get the Champions League. So that might be what they were thinking, and it might well be that his agents have said things like, we want to go to a top Champions League club, and their attitude might be, well, we're a top Champions League club now. But
that's the thing, though. They're
not. Exactly.
That's what I mean. They're in that weird space where they're on the way, but they're still kind of in stepping stone territory, and they would take major offence listening to that. But that's just the way it is. Like pre-PSR, Liverpool have to do this with Torres. Sterling goes to Man City. Sterling doesn't leave current Liverpool now.
No.
In that same place. Torres the same. It comes down. It ultimately comes down to like the level that you're competing at, what you think you're deserving of, the point at which you're currently navigating your career. Isaac's 26.
But Coutinho moves to Barcelona. It's the first time Liverpool have qualified for the Champions League since 13-14, it's going to be the first time Liverpool played a Champions League knockout game since 2009. And that's the moment that Liverpool were in. And there are parallels. A couple of years ago, Newcastle qualified for Champions League, but it doesn't mean the same thing. And there are the parallels there.
There's his contract offer as well. If you think about it, rewind again to January, they're not offering him a new contract because they don't know if they can afford it. They suddenly Champions League looms into view, and they start back. Well, of course, we've got the dough. We can go and offer what's his face a contract now, can't we? But by the time they start making those noises to the agent's going, too little, too late, boys.
But he has 3 years left. And this remains. And if you're Newcastle, you can still be looking at each other and going, he's got 3 years.
But it's that versus the conversations, that versus the understandings. And I think if in the scenario where we have no inside track and nothing's come out, if you're just looking at in absolute binary terms, player with 3 years left suddenly asks to leave, then club holds all the cards and club goes, well, we'll decide. If we don't want you, don't. But if there have been a series of relationships and dialogues for a good part, 9 months, a year, that has given that player the impression, especially that with Suarez gave us 1 more year, Coutinho gave us 6 months more. I think the year that's just happened is the 1 more year. I think last summer there was Isak might have liked to have moved on. There was talk about the move to Chelsea. I think it was a live topic last summer that their player could move on. I think he's had the 1 more year, and I think that's the tacit or implicit understanding, Josh. I'll go to you on this one. And that's what's fueling the certainty of sorts from the Isak camp that no, it's bullshit, and you're not bullshitting us again, having withdrawn contract offers, etc. You're not bullshitting us again that we can't move. You can say what letter of the law you've got, but if you want to play letter of the law, which is a 3-year contract, we'll fucking go on strike, and you want to see what that means. I've got a feeling that's where they are.
But the thing with the 3-year thing, though, is that seems to have been initially viewed by Newcastle as, well, that's why he's staying, and you can't move on the back of that. Whereas in reality, they should have probably looked at that as, that's why we get loads for this player then.
Yeah.
Ekitike, with Frank masters of this. Ekitike 4 years on his deal, so Liverpool have just had to pay top whack. That wasn't Frank going, well, he's got 4 years on his contract, he's staying. No. The fact he's got 3 years, 4 years on his contract means you can get top whack for him now. And if he's said, I want to go, there's your PR. He said he wants to leave. A lot of clubs, a lot of supporters would understand that ultimately, as long as you got at the other end. But they needed to use the 3-year thing as a negotiating tool, like a power play thing. But instead, it's festered. It's gone into this position where they now look like they have gradually realised we're going to have to sell him here. And Liverpool are almost now playing him a little bit by just waiting and hanging on in this lead rider stuff about
I'd like to Google
the waiting for the bid and all this.
I'd like to Google this, but Newcastle have been naming numbers for some time around Alexander Isak. It's been in the press because everyone, that's a lot of money. God, he's worth that much. We were doing transfer shows back in January where we would discuss that it was going to be, because Newcastle were briefing, it would take a bid of at least 120 million to buy Alexander Isak, right? So the sense was that they were pricing everyone out of the market. That was the sense. And then sort of by May comes around, it would take a bid of 150 million. I think there are direct quotes from senior people in Newcastle saying that. Key factor there, the analysis from everybody was, look how much they want for that player. Nobody can afford that. But the key thing was, that's not much different from what Frankfurt were doing over Ekitike when they were going, it would take 100 million euros and we don't need the fucking money. And they did, and their chairman or director of football said that. I see the parallel there, Josh.
Yeah, well, you just need to say to the player in Ekitike's case, probably, don't worry, we will sell you. Don't worry, we're just playing
if the dough is there.
Yeah, if the dough's there, yeah. But, you've got 4 years
Phil?
on. Liverpool did this with Coutinho, by the way. Just shortly before Coutinho's departure, they extended his contract. And that wasn't as a means of you're staying for your career. That was, you protect your investments, you protect your assets. If Barcelona do come in with, you were getting rumoured at the time, you pay top whack, and that's what they ended up doing. People still talk about that Coutinho fee today. I was literally listening to someone on TalkSport yesterday speaking about it, because they still can't believe the level of it. But it was because Liverpool had 4 or 5 years on his deal or something like that at the time.
You sort of think about it from another perspective as well, is how does deciding that you're going to get a player on a 6-year deal and you're basically going to hold into that no matter what happens, how does that then reflect on other signings? If someone's looking at it this summer and it's well, hang on, I don't want to go to Newcastle for a very long time, but I think it's a good move for me. And then in 2 or 3 years, I can go somewhere else, like Ekitike has, for example.
Literally Sesko right now.
Like, what's it saying to those players that what you're actually going to do is basically say, no, that you are ours. You are not leaving under any circumstances. You're here. It's not great, because ultimately the whole football and food chain, you want to move up it. The club, not just the players, the club as well. And when you're doing stuff that turns players off to you, it makes it hard. And like, knowing where you are, I think once you know where you are on that food chain, it becomes easier for you to move up. I think you're seeing it with Everton at the minute as well, who appear to be like they're going after players, and then Moyes is coming out and going, oh well, he wants to go somewhere else. It's like, well, go after a different kind of player then.
Work out what shop. This is back to the shop.
Work out which shop you are in, and then go from there. And that, it feels like Newcastle are not aware of the shop that they're in. They want to be in a different shop. They want to control the behaviour in the shop when it's not how you sell things in that shop. It's so disjointed that what they're doing, that it's like a lack of self-awareness almost, and I don't think it's a very, very good way of doing things.
Just slightly pivoting, Neil, although I can't avoid a subject still related to the Isak deal. I was intrigued by Slot's comments after the Yokohama game. He was asked questions about Luis Diaz and the replacing of Luis Diaz. He deflected away from it being essential to replace him like for like, for us needing a left winger, and it'd be quite easy to assert that, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But he did make some reference to how you can replace somebody indirectly through quality, and I found that intriguing, and I wondered, is he subtly signalling something like seeing Isak as effectively a replacement in the squad for someone like Luis Diaz?
Well, as it stands, he is. Because if he's the next forward, Liverpool are back to having 5 forwards, because you include Darwin Núñez.
Yeah.
So I think that is inarguable. That, effectively Liverpool, if Liverpool's ideal is that they have 5 forwards and they sell Diaz, Núñez hasn't gone anywhere, and then Isak comes in, then Liverpool's 5 forwards are Isak, Ekitike, senior forwards, Isak, Ekitike, Núñez, Salah and Gakpo.
Yeah.
And that we go with that, and we see where we end up, and that's what he does.
Yeah, I suppose it's similar to something we've always said about Salah in a certain sense, is that replacing Salah doesn't mean we're replacing him with the best right winger in the world. We may replace Salah. We may be doing it at the moment. Maybe Isak is replacing Salah. We are doing that at the moment. What did you make of his comments more broadly, Josh, about the left wing situation? I mean, he referenced I thought it was intriguing. He referenced Gakpo. He talked about the emergence of Rio Ngamoa, and he even said, which interested me, about Florian Wirtz could be used off the left. One player he didn't mention, which some of the press pack have mentioned as being an option off the left from here on in, was Ekitike. Do you think that was just an oversight, or do you think he maybe isn't viewing Ekitike as a left-wing option?
Yeah, it's tricky that. I always go back to when people were chatting Núñez on the left wing. And
we did actually see him there.
Yeah, we did at times, yeah. But that was specifically when we had the system where the wide forward was running behind, we had the false 9 and all that, and it kind of worked a little bit. But generally speaking, as specifically a slot wide player, Núñez just couldn't. He hasn't got enough craft, I don't think, to beat players 1v1 out wide, gets the byline and all that sort of thing. It's just kind of knock and run, really. I think Ekitike has a bit more to his game in that sense.
He's a much better dribbler.
Much better dribbler, good carrier of the ball, quite tricky. But it still feels uncomfortable to me if I picture it like. So I'm kind of on board with sort of. I'd rather not be a thing, if I'm honest. I think it's...
You'd rather he was just a centre-forward option?
Probably, yeah. And if not that, then have a go of him just playing like as a second striker behind someone like an Isak, to be honest. But as a wide player, I associate Rio, that kind of type, being a slot wide player versus an Ekitike who needs must, fair enough, but I think generally speaking you want to avoid that eventuality if you can.
Should we talk about Rio Ngamoa as a closing subject? I mean, he's obviously exciting beyond belief, and possibly the most exciting young forward we've had since, I'm going to say it's got to be Raheem Sterling, really. Neil, to your mind, from what we've seen, from what you know about his pedigree, Chelsea, he was the best player in the Chelsea academy. Apparently, they were gutted for him to go. Do you think it's possible that he's on a trajectory where we get more than just the odd League Cup appearance out of him this season?
I think it's possible. I don't know if it should be preferred.
I mean, this stuff happens. I mean, I was joking with you before we came down about how Barcelona do this kind of thing. They put an 18-year-old in here, a 17-year-old in there, and the media says they're from La Masia, and when we all take it on board that it's fine, they then play the majority of the season. Now, I'm not saying that's a possibility with him.
Well, I mean, you are
well,
you?
no, I'm saying that sizable more than just the odd league cup.
Well, tell me your number.
It's a good point. Starts, I don't know, half a dozen starts across the league and Champions League. Possibly.
That's perfectly reasonable, and in fact, that's what Liverpool, I think, should be targeting. Plus a ton of substitute appearances.
A ton of
go
substitute
from
appearances.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, and that. But I think you still therefore need to have another pretty consistent option for the left wing, and I don't think that's going to be Florian Wirtz. I agree with Josh in that I don't think it's going to be Ekitike, which therefore says that you need to go into the market. But Liverpool. The way, that language from Schlott, it's quintessential Liverpool. Liverpool will say, not least because it's true, we are happy. Liverpool will constantly say, we are happy. We are happy with the Luis Diaz situation. He is not for sale unless someone makes an offer which changes that for us. But we are happy for Luis Diaz to continue on his current contract and play for Liverpool. It was true. And then the offer came in that Liverpool it would be daft to ignore the offer in question for a 28-year-old who's turning 29 this season, just off arguably his best year in terms of output for Liverpool, but no guarantees he sustains that. We are no longer happy. That will do us. Thank you very much
We're
indeed.
in a new version of happy.
Liverpool will say and be happy. If they don't replace with an obvious person, they will find a way to make it work, whether it's with stringent management of Gakpo, whether it's with another form of creativity, because this is almost like it's the nearest thing to a contemporary Liverpool way, is to make sure you are continually in situations where you are able to say, no, but we're happy.
Because that desperation, clubs can smell it. That's what I was speaking about before with Brentford.
100%.
With Brentford know they've got Newcastle, and it's the worst place ever to be in. It's worth saying as well, on that Slot comment, at the end of the season he gets asked by reporters that, we're expecting a big summer, aren't we? And Slot goes, well, I don't think it'd be that big, just a few little weapons here and there. Mate, it's massive.
Yeah.
It's as big as it's ever been this summer.
100%.
And he's massively played it down before the event. So,
and we've got good players.
We've got good players, a good squad.
Yeah.
And Liverpool, we've been talking to a couple, and now we find out after these by Ekitike. They've been talking to Ekitike since January, and Slot talked to him at the end of the season. But the key part about this, though, is he isn't telling a lie, because this is what Liverpool do. Liverpool put themselves consistently into situations where they're able to go, no, we're happy. And every now and again, it'll turn around and bite them. Every now and again, it'll end up being one gamble too many in a couple of different ways. But Liverpool will spend their time going, no, we're happy. You don't need to worry about us, we're happy. When he was asked about the centre-back situation, I think there was a bit of tone of maybe he might want to go and get two because the Gomez injury. And he was like, no, we're quite happy with our centre-back options, but we haven't replaced Quansah yet. So again, it's an acknowledgement of reality. We need to replace Quansah, but once we replace Quansah, we're happy. Could we be happier? Yeah, but we're happy. And that's what Liverpool do all the time. And that's all he's doing with this one. He's reflecting what will be reflected in any briefings that the club do, what will be reflected in every time he speaks. If a journalist rings up Richard Hughes, no, we're happy. We're happy. Don't worry about us. Yeah, we might be interested, but don't worry about us.
I think it's a plus and minus balancing game. I think you start the summer and you go, would you accept a good bid for Luis Diaz day one of the summer if you had no sense of certainty of who else you were buying? In fact, you hadn't begun a single conversation. Let's just be reductive about it. Would you sell Luis Diaz for 68 million day one of the summer on June the 1st? Would you do that, Liverpool? You'd be happy with the bid, but you'd think the day after we did it, although we'd have the money in the bank, we'd be in a -1 situation in terms of quality and quantity of players. I think what Liverpool do is get ahead of the curve. So the fact that they put Florian Wirtz and Ekitike in their pool of talent meant they were in significant surplus by the time the Diaz thing came along. So scenario A, they still replace Diaz, even more surplus. Scenario B, they don't replace Diaz, but it's not the end of the world because they were winning anyway. They'd banked the chips. I think that's how, I'm making your point, but I think they put themselves in a position where they're win-win all the time, or win/hyper-win, but never win-draw or lose-draw, whatever. I think that's the reality, yeah?
Yeah, and I think they've also got a little bit of a story to tell on Rio and on Train Ione, which both is an internal and an external story.
They knew more than we did on those two, I think.
I think so, but I think even if they had, because sometimes players just don't play well. You pick them and they don't play well. They did have a bad game. And they might have had 2 bad games in the pre-season. But I think on both of them, I think with Ione, Liverpool were at times linked this season to another centre midfielder, Angelo Stiller being the one that I think arguably came most prominent. But Liverpool made clear they weren't going to do anything daft, as did Real Madrid in the end. It's worth
He's
pointing
just
out.
got injured, by the way.
But there we go.
Ligaments.
And and with Rio, I think that they are prepared to sort of walk the we're happy walk. And also, ultimately, I think where the squad probably shakes out is if Chiesa had been maybe what they wanted him to be in the August of last year when they signed him, they'll be happy with that sort of return from Rio this season, with a view to that then kicking on to becoming a serious permanent member of the first team last season. If you ask Arne Slot or anyone at Liverpool, was Chiesa a member of the first team last season, he would say yes, by the way. He would say yes. Whether or not we would then point at the number of minutes played and go, well, hang on, come on. No, in their minds, you become a senior squad member, you are a senior squad member.
They brought him to play.
Yeah, and last season they had 5 forwards plus Chiesa. And I think that the best outcome this season is they have 5 forwards plus Rio. And if that's the situation, they're in phenomenal nick, ultimately, especially if they've recruited well.
Actually, just thinking back to Sterling's early period at Liverpool, his obvious breakout season would be 13-14, where he starts in the team, he goes out of the side, doesn't he? In fact, there's even murmurs coming into the January window of 13-14 that he could be sold.
I remember him playing it. He played at Spurs, didn't he, in that 5-0, and it was his first appearance.
He'd come back for a while.
Did he come on or did he start? I can't quite remember, but it was...
He started
He
Tottenham.
hadn't been massively involved for a while, and then all of a sudden he was in there, and it was, oh, okay, hang on. And
He'd had a stinker against Hull, do you remember?
Yes.
And dropped out, and we'd lost 3-1 at Hull.
You're all wrong, by the way. You started the 5-1 against Norwich, the 4-1 against West Ham, and then he started the game against Tottenham.
Yeah, sure. No, I didn't say that. It was Phil that's talking about Tottenham.
Fair enough.
No, he came back.
There's 4 on the benches there, was sort of...
But they would be 4
Yeah.
But he came back in around December.
Yeah.
I even remember when he bagged against Norwich, and I thought, oh, that's good, because we haven't seen much sign of life from that prospect for a while. And then he was back in the team and up and running. I think
that's all fair. That's fair.
I think the previous season, how we'd used him, which is Rodgers. Yes, Rodgers.
There was a period where it was Sterling, Suso, and Suarez as a front 3, wasn't it?
He was getting minutes, and then he dropped out with it. It's almost like by January we decided to park him in that season. We never saw him again. I could see something like that happen with Rio. They used some of his coltish enthusiasm, and then about 10 games in, go, yeah, we'll just put you back in your box for a bit, and let's see when we bring you out again. I can see something like that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying. I've got this in front of me now. In 2013, for instance, Sterling, in literally the calendar year the half season 2013, so January to May, Sterling makes 4 starts, only 4 starts in that run. And
of 2013, January
2013 until the end of that season, he makes 4 starts.
Yeah, that's my recollection. There was talk he had niggling injuries, and he had been put back in his box a bit. Okay, any other business we want to do before we start planning our next show where we talk endlessly about Alexander Isak? Phil? The only other thing I would as in any other business thing, is Mark Gahey. There was some report that Liverpool and Palace are just staring each other out.
It's gone ominously quiet, hasn't it?
Is it ominous, or is it just standard?
Palace getting linked with other centre-halves, though, have you seen that?
Yeah, Palace being linked with other centre-halves, but no one else has been linked with Mark Gahey.
No.
And he's not being linked with a new contract. And no one's saying anything. I always think it's interesting when things just go quiet like that. It sort of means that the sort of, like, it almost feels like Liverpool and Palace are waiting for Palace to sort the centre half that they want out.
Yeah, that's my read on it as well.
It's the only reason it could possibly have gone as quiet as it's gone. But generally speaking, it's broadly quite quiet on the centre back front as a whole for Liverpool, really, isn't it? I think I've only seen us linked to 3.
Cresswell.
There's a Greek lad. In the last sort of week or two. I don't mean sort of a while ago, but there was a Greek lad in Germany. I think he's either Wolfsburg or Werder Bremen or one of those. But other than that, there's been no other chat, which feels weird, given I think it's quite obvious that Liverpool are going to sign a centre back.
Yeah. I think that the other thing that's interesting, full stop, for Palace and elsewhere, you can throw Newcastle into that as well if you want, is we can do the thing where we really, really tore into Newcastle over the course of this. I knew we would with Josh on as well. We've really tore into them, but it's also worth pointing out there's a number of Premier League clubs, I'd say at least half, and more than half, if you don't include the 3 promoted teams, who are really struggling to do business, who are really struggling to conclude deals at the moment. It's not 1 or 2. You know, you can go all the way down the league, and there's a number of them who really appear to be finding it difficult as to where to pitch themselves. So far, Palace have only bought a 27-year-old left-back from Ajax for 2.3 million. That's all they've done. And they've got a European campaign on the horizon, whether it's Conference League or Europa League, but they've got a European campaign on the horizon.
Have Villa done any business?
Villa have done very little. Fulham have not moved at all.
Well, I praised Brentford before. You know, they're looking in a precarious spot at the moment for me. I think Carrick has a good signing, but they've lost him Brain, lost him manager.
Northgard.
Wissa is on his way. The captain's just gone. So, and Collins is, you know, we're getting it with Liverpool a little bit. So,
who's the new manager there?
Keith Andrews. He was the set piece coach last season.
But there's a lot of it. What I would say is, again, I'm not necessarily, you don't have to speak in Newcastle's defence, because you should be, they should be more forthright and forward thinking. But you know, Forest have just done this lad from Bologna, and they've got a couple in from Botafogo in slightly odd circumstances.
I think the centre forward could be great. By the way, he's
the Botafogo centre.
Yeah, Igor Jesus.
Yeah, I think you might be right on that. That might be
Bournemouth
the business.
haven't done much either.
Bournemouth have done very little. Tottenham had the initial flush of Kudus and the link to Gibbs White, but all they've done so far is separate to that really is get the lad in from Japan who might be good, and confirm Tell and Danso, both of them they had as loan to buy lined up. They haven't actually moved anywhere else. I don't think they should. West Ham haven't done a great deal at this point. They've got a left wing back. They've got a left wing back in, and they've got Walker Peters on a free.
The most prolific quietly have been Arsenal.
Well, Arsenal have been picking players up. Yeah, Wolves have picked players up. I mean, Brighton have got a lot of business done early as well. And there is a rumour now that Van Hecker does not want to sign a new deal, and Brighton might choose to cash in on him.
And on that bombshell...
It is a bombshell, Rob.
It is a bombshell. We'll save it for next time. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Neil. And thank you to Saley. We will be back.